So just down in the legs. Okay, now let's just bounce. Yeah, so we're just setting up a simple action which we don't have to think about, basically. So we're not controlling it with our mind. So the quality of the bounce, in a way, depends upon the ability of my mind to come out and just let my body do it. It's a bit like bouncing a ball. If you're bouncing a ball on the floor, you're not following it with your hand. You're just letting it do its own thing. So the same thing here with your body. So just trying to condition the body to naturally return energy. So in other words, to bounce. So Taoism is all about return, the return. And in order to get the legs to behave in this springy way, we just need to really just release our weight down into them. So that's the first stage, really, of every practice session and of one's Tai Chi life in general. So the first 3 years are traditionally sink and relax. So the more we bounce, the longer we bounce, the more it opens up. So this starts sort of stretching open a bit. The legs start rounding outwards. So these pockets here sort of open a bit. I'm getting pushed gradually onto the outside edges. So I want to just notice all of these things without forcing them. If you force them, then your body will just try to do the opposite to protect itself. And so it's just getting your body to behave the way you want it. It's quite a subtle business. If you use your mind to force it, then you'll just get the opposite effect. So you just have an image in your mind and you just gradually approach it. It's a bit like being friendly with a frightened animal. So, the nature of the return is that as I sink down into my legs are storing energy which is then returned. Yeah? So this is what's happening. So it's a bit like a spring. If you press the spring will store energy. So if you suddenly release your hand, the spring will bounce up. So that's the nature of the return in Tai Chi. So it's all about storing energy and then releasing it. So we have to get the legs just used to, so I'm not bending my legs. I'm not intentionally bending my legs. I'm just allowing myself to sink into them. And all the time I'm sinking, there's this potential return. So if I was intentionally sinking into my legs, then I would just drop down a level and there'd be no return. Yeah? So here I'm just finding a level and just bouncing on it. Very much like just bouncing a ball. Bang, 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 bang. So just conditioning the body to be lively in a natural way. And now we want the same, so that basic idea of returning energy, we want that everywhere. So particularly here. So this, again, is like, you can think of this like a springy ball or a balloon, like a springy balloon. And by tapping it, again, you're just helping it become a little bit tight and a little bit more springy. So as you tap your belly, just have a loose wrist and just be aware of how the belly springs your wrist off. So feel the return that your belly is providing. So there's stories in the martial arts of, because in China, traditionally you test the other person's dantian by thumping it as hard as you can. And there's stories of masters breaking their wrists on the other's dantian because so much spring has been returned, it just snaps the wrist. So you want that sort of feeling. So I bang and it bounces off. Yeah? It's like a little trampoline. So as it's getting a little bit more tight and more springy, just feel the support it's giving to your lower back. So the tightness here just pulls the tail under a little bit, and this whole area just feels more tidy, more together, more capable. So when you're using the legs in order to do things in the upper body, that energy has to pass through this area. So it takes a lot of punishment, this area, dantian, lower back. Now let's try our third exercise with the dantian. So just pulling in and then squeezing out. So to start with, we just impose a mechanical action with our mind upon the body. So it's, to start with, it's just plain and regimented. But gradually we want it to become less like a mechanical machine and more like an organic machine. And an organic machine will always be using that returning springy energy. So I'm pulling my belly in here, but what I'm actually feeling is the stretch in my back. So when I contract the front, the back stretches. And what I want is for that stretched back to start pulling itself back. And then here, as the back continues tensing, this starts stretching. And I want to feel the return is actually this trying to pull itself back. Is this stretch pulling itself back. And so here it's the back stretching and then returning that's actually causing the changes, and then the front stretching and returning. So you have to make sure that when you do an action, so these are the muscles that are working my lower back, but these are the muscles that are being stretched. And so this is what I want to feel, because these are the ones that are going to kick in next in order to return. So you're feeling both sides of the joint, if you like. You're feeling both muscles, the agonist and the antagonist. And your mind is actually in the one that's being stretched, because that's the one that's going to return the energy. It's not the one doing the work. So here, this is doing the work, but this is being stretched. So this is where my mind is. So this is very important to catch, because basically it all hinges on this, on the ability to actually intensify, bring spirit into the return. So here it's stretching and it pulls back. Here the back is stretching and then that recoils. So if it's just a mechanical machine, then what tends to happen is there's a little pause at the end of each phase before you then start again. When it's an organic machine, it's more like it's generating its own movement. And so I need to bring real concentration and intensity into that point of change from one movement into the following one. So here, my back starts pulling and that returns me, and here my belly is stretching, but then there comes a point where it can't stretch anymore, so it starts pulling back. So it's very much like a strip of elastic that you're stretching, and then eventually the elastic just pulls back on its own almost. Because the other side, the side that's getting tense and tense, just can't go any further. So we're just looking how the yin changes to yang and how the yang changes to yin. That's basically the essence of Taoism, really. So it gets to the point where you're not really having to make conscious decisions. You're not saying, okay, now I do the other one. Because it's all working because of the energy, because of the spirit, because of the mood or the content here. So here, then you can just work very gently. So you want the feeling that it's beginning to take you by surprise a bit. So it's sort of bringing things out, it's highlighting details which you hadn't really noticed before. So this is the important thing with practice. Practice is you just start off just repeating something you've done before in order for it to gather enough energy to venture into the unknown, into places that you've never been before. Otherwise, you're not really progressing, you're just standing still. So it's a certain quality of concentration. It's not a very focused, determined concentration. You're just setting something in motion and then almost like letting it do itself. And your mind is sort of with it, but not too much, otherwise you'll ruin it. Yeah? So basically a mind that is actually focused and concentrated is the only thing you know for sure is it's going to make a mess of things. So I just want somehow to be possessed by the energy and the feeling rather than my mind's control or concentration. So this is something you find out when you practice. There's so many practice sessions I'd be working on a posture in the Tai Chi and I'd almost be in tears because I just couldn't do it. And then you start thinking about something else as one does. And then I suddenly realize I'm doing it right. So the mind just needs to be soft. If you can soften your mind, then the body will do it for you. Pull. And squeeze out. And pull. So it's a little bit like being a little bit drunk. You know, that stage where you get the giggles. And it's all just fun before the sort of angst and the depression sets in. Ooh. Okay. And now let's just bring it back to here. Okay. And now just feel yourself standing And there should be almost, there's like a sort of a bounce, the same way like if you had like a ball on the ocean or on a lake, and you looked at it very carefully, there'd always be some sort of movement, because the ground, the lake, is actually, there's a swell, there's this energetic movement within it, which is always going to cause a slight bounce. So when you're relaxed in the right way, there's always going to be that movement coming from underneath. So it's not just your own body, there's a sense of something rumbling up through your legs. There's actually causing, so you're connecting with sort of like very deep, long rhythms. Yeah. So there's a very gentle, ooh, yeah. Now, an important component is to actually allow the head movement. And now what we tend to do, we tend to try and keep control of what's happening with our mind by actually keeping our head solidly rigid. Yeah? So if you think, I've got the ground here, the ground isn't moving, but the part of my body that's furthest from the ground should definitely be moving, a bit like a tree blowing in the breeze. Yeah? So if you can just let your head have a little, tiny little bit of, even just the possibility of movement, so you're not keeping it rigid still, then you'll just get that just lively energy coming up through you. Now, the next stage with like a double weighted posture like this. So double weighted just means I've got the weight equal in both feet. Okay. So you want to, what we're wanting is, because single weighted doesn't simply mean that I've got the weight in one foot. So when I'm like this, I can be just as double weighted as I am here. Yeah? Single weighted means that I have relaxed to such an extent that I have allowed my two halves to fall away from each other. Yeah. So this is what we would like our relaxation. So this is quite difficult because we don't realize it, but the mind is actually always holding us together. Yeah. Because we're actually two people. You're a left side and you're a right side. And what we tend to do is hold these together with the mind in order to make a self. So in Tai Chi, really in a sense, we're trying to become schizophrenic. We're trying to split into our two parts, the left and the right. And they're quite different. And for that, something in you just has to let go so that you can actually just fall into each side of your body. And that's when you really feel yourself pushing into the outside edges. And a consequence of that, a consequence of becoming single-weighted, by which I mean splitting into left and right, is that the possibility of turning comes in. Yeah? So now, as well as there being this sort of ebb and flow, there's also a little, you're also playing with the left and the right turn. Yeah? So let's just get that coming. So just very gently, just letting yourself twist from side to side. And just try and feel the two sides of you. We tend to let one side dominate. So what we think of as our self, our personality, our character, is the consequence of allowing one side of us to dominate. And maybe you would think it's the side that you tend to write with. That one's been, you know, we tend to privilege that one over the other, but not necessarily. Yeah? You often find that the right hand, the one you write with, has been so locked into the controlling mind that it doesn't know itself anymore. So here we're just trying, you just want to feel, yeah, so what's my left, how does my left side feel different from my right side? Yeah? You know, that you've got these two complementary but also contesting personalities. Yeah? So you are actually these two entities that are constantly, in a sense, they're constantly squabbling, constantly arguing. They're trying, one's always trying, they're trying just to sort of, they're like two naughty brothers, yeah? They're just constantly bickering. And that actually produces energy. So this sort of contest that's going on all the time between the members of a duality is what produces a lot of the energy that we're working with. So I want to feel this side and feel this side, and just feel how they're quite different. And so that I am actually the union of these two. So you see that my mind shouldn't be a thing that privileges one side over the other. It should be something that is so big and compassionate, it can actually embrace both of these parts of it and get them working together. And then you realize you're quite different than what you thought. And in a sense, other people will know you much better than you know yourself, yeah? Because they will see these two sides of you all the time. It's just your mind that tends to try and pretend one of them doesn't exist. Okay. And now let's just take that turning a little bit further. But again, just feel, well, it almost feels like you're splitting in two, like your two sides are falling away from each other. Just very gentle. So feel when you turn here, you tend to be thrown into that front side of the body. So you can just allow your attention to be constantly switching from one side to the other. And when you manage to relax and just let the two sides fall into themselves rather than tensely hold on to each other, then it almost feels like it's difficult to keep control of your own body. You really tend to sort of stagger around like a drunkard. Yeah? But that's great. It's just a sign that something has happened and now you've just got to quickly learn how to keep yourself together. So any attempt to understand or to rationalize or to explain all of those processes will tend to pull these two sides of your body together. So we just have to let all of that go. Yeah, so imagine you were just going to do this turning exercise for an hour. So you'd go through all sorts of processes. You'll get bored, you feel the relaxation, you really get into some part of it and then another part. And eventually your mind would just give up. It would just give up trying to hold on. So that's what we want. So just feel the sacrum. The down chin. It's the interesting thing about meditating, sitting down cross-legged, is that this part of you just feels that you're not in the right place. Yeah, you're not quite in the middle. You're more in one side than the other. And so it's really just sort of just trying to relax and just allow your body to just naturally find a new center. And it's exactly the same Tai Chi. So it's the beauty of turning, is that turning, if you let it, will actually effectuate the separation between left and right because of the centrifugal force. Yeah? If you push it too much, of course, then the centripetal force will be pulling in so strongly that you'll effectively overriding the centrifugal. But you're just very gentle. Okay, now let's just bounce again. So just feel these tendons here, these muscles and tendons. So they're the ones really that need to sort of just relax a bit. And again, just feel almost like a crack is appearing in your middle and the either side is just falling away. So you start to feel a little bit unfamiliar. It's almost like your two arms are strangers to each other. Okay. And now let's just try just leaning over onto a leg. Okay. So just try and get it so that you are leaning, so that your spine and this leg are pretty much a straight line. And now just bounce into the leg. We're just wanting the leg just to be springy again. But just feel how much more difficult it feels because you've got all the weight basically bearing down into the one leg. So again, you're just trying to get into that outside edge, but not because you're pushing the knee out, but because you're relaxing here. This is letting go, so it's almost like you're leaving this leg behind, and you're just bouncing into this foot. So just feel the ground beneath the foot, and just feel it kicking back. So as you sink into the leg, the energy is returning up to this shoulder, or if this arm was up, it would be bouncing all the way up into this hand. Yeah. And then just come across into the other leg. So just lean across. So you can judge how much you want to lean. You can judge how far apart your feet are. You know, if you're feeling particularly tired or you've got an injury, then you can do it feet very close together with almost straight legs. So just feel this joint here. It's all in the hip. So 1 and 2 and remember, we're just trying to condition the leg to naturally bounce the energy back like a spring. 1 and 2, 1, 2. Yeah, and if it starts hurting in the leg, just sink more, relax into the pain and it will stop. If you believe that, you'll believe everything. But it does actually. So, and then across into the other foot. Yeah, so when it gets painful, just change. Just take it a few more bounces beyond what you consider to be your pain barrier. So you're always stretching the limits. So you're basically just relaxing here and here, the two hip joints, and then your sacroiliacs will naturally relax. 1, 2, 1, 2. That's it. Wow. And then across into the other leg. And then 1, 2. And so remember, it's not really how strong the leg is, it's the quality of the spring. It's the quality of the return. So it's interesting, the word spring in English, because it's got so many meanings, but basically they all mean return. So a spring in the ground is returning water from precipitation and everything. So the season is just returning the year, and the spring, the bouncy spring, is just returning energy. So they all basically mean the same thing. Whoa. Okay. And now let's just come back to here. Okay. And now just feel the danjian. And now let's just bang that. We're like banging the stick into the ground using your sacrum as the hammerhead. And your legs are like the handles. It's sort of a weird hammer. So your leg, like a pile driver, you're just banging down, just gently, just tapping down. And now just imagine you're looking at the world from here. So like your two eyes are now here, looking up at the world. So you're observing the world from your danjian. You're not so much observing as feeling. And so these eyes are just like a periscope. It's like two stalks coming out of your danjian. But this is where you feel your vision being processed. So if you can get that feeling of the eyes being down here, then you'll tend to get this forwards, which is what we want. We'll tend not to do this because obviously you've got your bum stuck out, you're looking at the ground with your danjian. So in Tai Chi, we have these sets, binary sets, or these dualities, if you like. So the obvious one is up and down. So you've got sinking and you've got rising. So that's the first stage. And then as soon as you start turning, moving from leg to leg or turning, then you split into left and right. So that's the one we've just been working on. So feeling like this side is just slipping into this foot, and this side is just slipping into this foot, and there's a gap opening up in the middle. And then the other obvious one is front and back. So the front of the body and the back of the body. So most people tend to go at the world with their front. So basically everything is here. And so they're actually operating within this range, if you like, because it's the range at which your eyes can see. And everything else is like a darkness. So in Tai Chi, what we're always trying to do is basically limit this, close this down, in order to allow the back to just spread out and come round and be touching the world. So you're touching the world with your back energy rather than your front energy. So you're withdrawing your front. So these centers, they become like little prisms, cells. So the word cell, the prisoner's cell, it just basically comes from the monk's cell. It's the same. It originated with monasteries. So the monk in his cell. So your cell is the room which you meditate in, which you work in. It's also your body, but it's also these centers. And you're wanting these to almost close down, almost like you're furling into them, like a flower that's just reversing the opening of its petals, so that something from your back can just open out. So your spine flares. So when we moved to Blakeney in 2001, so that 5 years that we were in the forest, that's when my teacher was really working on what he called the energetic body. So all these structures that he was beginning to feel from the back, they're all basically from the back. Yeah. So the main ones were like the angel's wings and the tail. So it's like you have a long tail that's dropping down behind you, and you have these two like dragon's wings or angel's wings, depends on how you want to visualize it, that come out of your shoulder blades, quite hefty, meaty. And then there was also like a big mane that ran down the back. There were horns. Yeah. So there's a whole panoply of equipment and apparatus that we were getting into. You want to, in order to activate the imagination and allow these energetic structures some play, you really need to close down the front. So it's like that the rational mind and the imagination are opposites, and one will always work against the other. So this mind needs to just furl in and just feel your back beginning to dominate the room. There's all sorts of stories of like the Tibetans, like great Tibetan masters, meditating in a room and someone sneaking in and the room is full of demons. The master is just totally inside, but he's let out his energy. So the room is just swarming with these Tibetan deities, which are all just aspects of his own energy. So this is all from the back. So in Tai Chi, it's very important. So basically, ward off is just that. Ward off is you bringing your back energy out in order to interact with the world. And for that, you need to withdraw the front energy. You can't have them both going at the same time. Okay, now let's just do this exercise that we've done. This is just turning from side to side. Yeah, so we've got the sinking and the relaxing going, so we've got the up and the down. We've got the two sides of the body falling away from each other into like a single weighted aspect. And now we're also bringing around the back and letting it furl in. So it's just sort of doing this. I'm stirring the back and bringing it round into these two pots. And just really get down, get down. You want to disappear into your centers. It doesn't really matter what you're doing with the arms. So remember, if you're being too careful, too rational, if you're trying to watch what your arms are doing and control them, then you'll be working against the energy. So you just want to set something in motion and then just disappear inside. So exactly as you would if you're meditating. So when you're meditating, you're not constantly looking at your posture. You just get your posture reasonable and then you just forget it. And maybe by the end you're completely collapsed, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that you've spent quiet time with your energy. So why? So just feel how, when you turn to one side, so it's like my rational part is going with the turn, and my imaginative part is coming out from the other side. So I have to turn away from the energy in order to allow it to be itself. If I'm trying to look at the energy, I will always reduce it. So I'm turning away and the energy comes out. And just feel these 2 points like the eyes on the back of the head. So it's like you start to sense the world from your back, especially your back head, and the back hips, and the back of the shoulders, near the shoulders. Wow. So. Yeah, so sinking and relaxing. So sinking down into the legs, mind in the dantian. If you're looking at the world, then it's from the dantian, so your belly's coming forwards a bit. You're relaxing the 2 sides of the body away from each other. And you're allowing your front to close down and your back to open up. Yeah, so just imagine someone was videoing you and you just got no idea how you're doing until you watch the video back. Yeah, there's no way of telling. So there's no points of feedback other than the quietness of your own mind. So if you can withdraw inside, then the chances are something will start happening energetically. And then just slowly let it slip into the figure of 8. Yes, now instead of circles with the hands, you're just doing figures of 8. But again, it's coming from the legs, it's coming from the ground, it's coming from your 2 sides of your bodies falling away from each other, and it's coming especially from your back. Yeah? So the top part of the figure of 8 is actually with your upper body, and the bottom part is with your legs and your dantian. So you need to make the bottom part of the figure of 8 at least as big as the top part, especially to start with. Yeah, so to start with, when my teacher taught this, he always stressed the importance of the bottom part. Because of course everyone tends to do this, big top bit and a tiny little bottom bit. So you're wanting the bottom bit to almost uproot yourself. You're getting underneath your own action, especially underneath your own dantian. And the top part just goes high enough just to clear your head. Yeah? So it's almost as though you become encapsulated inside your own figure of 8s, each side of your body. Yeah? So here, this side of my body is actually inside this figure of 8, and this side is inside this one. Yeah? And just letting them play. So watch Sila. Yeah, so she's never really done this before. So she's actually doing it really well because she's struggling. Yeah, this is the beauty. As soon as you become an expert, you lose it. Yeah? So we have to be just constantly looking for, for where we're not very good, because that's where we get it right. It's a strange business. Well, so my teacher always used to say, if there's only one exercise you've got time for, let it be this. Remember, you know, we do these exercises to try and wake up the internal movement. So to try to get that slumbering snake to start uncoiling and just passing through the body. Yeah? So to start with, one's just sort of doing this, and then as it starts to wake up, the external movements become almost negligible because you've actually got that internal movement going on. So it doesn't really matter anymore. So once that's woken up, then you're there, you're enlightened. If only to fall asleep again in 10 minutes' time. Yeah? So this is all we can do. This is all we can do is just wake up every now and then, in the hope that one day we'll never go back to sleep. Yeah? But the chances of that happening depends so much on talent and karma that it's highly unlikely. Whoa. Okay. Now let's just bring it back to here. And again, just feel that subtle bounce. Now, it's like a background signal. Okay? So something is just tapping and bouncing away. So remember the movie E.T., the 1980, I think. Yeah, so the little alien that comes to Earth and gets stranded, and all he wants to do is go home. So he makes friends with these two children who help him make a transmitter. And then he's just transmitting messages to his own planet, and eventually they come and retrieve him and rescue him. And so it's basically what the work is. The work is you're just generating energy and transmitting it in the hope that one day someone will come and take you away. And it's not when you have kids and you just watch them begin to watch movies like that, they just so much take it to heart. You know? Because in a sense, I mean, it's like every movie that's ever made, in a sense, is true. You know, so there's part of it that will resonate with us, you know, especially the great ones. Okay. Now let's just, so maybe let's just, here, and just up and out. So here we want to feel the independence of these 2 points. So I want to be able to just open this up and let it really lift into my arms without this really being affected. Yeah? So So what do I have to do to let go of my heart in such a way that it can open without my belly getting dragged up, but with the belly still being a support underneath? So basically what you need to do is just tighten your belly. So just bring tension here, try and pull the belly in, and just allow the chest just to open up. So very much like yoga. So yoga people are experts at this. You know, when you see like a yoga adept, they just look really obnoxious because they're just so open here and so trim here. You know? It's like you could kill them. You know? And so we'd like to have an element of that, just as a touch of that. So here, I'm releasing here, I'm just letting all this go so that my arms can venture open, but I'm holding on to the dantian still. That's great, that's great. And the problem with working with tension is it tends to creep in everywhere. So we have to be really careful that it's only my dantian that's holding on, but the heart is releasing. Ooh. Pulling the dantian in a bit. So once you've got a degree of independence between your heart and your dantian, we then just want to try and get it so that the openness here depends upon the tightness here. If they're both loose and open, then I just lose my energy. Pulling the dantian. And now just keep the hands out. And now just start turning now. Just keep a slight bend in the legs. And just start turning, just gently, like you've got a lot of sort of inertia. So it's going to take a while before you get to full flow. So one, two, and again, feel the return. So feel yourself loading a spring in the leg and then the spring returning. So it's not so much you making a conscious decision to return, it's the leg that can't go any further, so it has to bounce you back. It's very much like being on a swing. You know when you're on a swing and you change direction. So from going up, you start coming down. Then there's like a burst. There's a burst of feeling and of intensity. So it's the same in this. So when we change direction, there's a burst as it just, because basically you think what happens when you change direction, there's an enormous lot happening. There's an enormous change in speed, because you basically got to slow down and then start again going in the opposite direction. So there's loads of energy at that point. Way. So just, and that's all that so it's generating in the leg, but it's actually expressing in the chest. So it's like the same as when you're on a swing. When you're on a swing, you feel it in your head. So here we're feeling it in the chest and the head, but it's actually being generated in the leg. And then let it slow down. And now just bounce a little bit. Yeah, so now we've got a much narrower step. And again, just going to riding horse. So the space between your legs swelling. Just enjoy the pain in the arms. It's not every day you feel a pain like this. You should be thankful. Keep the tension in the down chin. When it gets difficult, just start praying. Lord Jesus Christ, Lamb of God, have mercy on me, poor sinner. It works. It's the great thing about Christianity, you know, when the going gets tough, you just think of what he went through. And you feel a bit better, or you don't feel so bad. Suffering is great. Okay, and now just arms up. And again, just feeling the belly again, so feel the tightness. So what tends to happen, the lower back will tend to bend a bit too much. So you just want a clear line down from the fingertips to your feet without too much bend in the back. So you need a bit of tension here to stop your bum flicking out behind you. That's great. You think of those like the Orthodox Christian monks. Yeah? So they're saying like the Jesus prayer, like 12,000 times a day. So 12 hours. It takes about an hour to say it 1,000 times. So eventually they get to the point where it's even going on in their sleep. And it just coordinates with the breathing. Yeah? It's beautiful. Wow. So this is basically just Osho's dynamic meditation, just without the jumping. Yeah. So we can try it with the jumping if you like. So just jumping. You don't need to hardly need to come off the ground. Yeah. You just want the feeling that your balls are bouncing up and down, or your tits are bouncing up and down. If you're a girl, yeah. So it's like, ooh. It's like one of those days you really wish you'd put a bra on. Yeah. So 1, 2, 1, 2. That's great. And just feel your lower back. Don't let your lower back get weak. Keep tension in the belly. Just work from the front of the foot. Don't let your heels touch the ground. You're just springing up from the toes. Okay. Now just bouncing again. I do that with my 98-year-old, you know. Again, she does always say, "You forget how old I am." I said, "That's my job. To forget how old you are." And now just come on to your toes and just keep bouncing. So when you come off the heels, you tend to topple like this. So we're just trying to keep the back sinking down. But so just feel as soon as you get off your heels, you lose stability, but you have much more spirit, much more instability. Yeah, so I'm just come off my heels. So I'm trying to. Ty and her friends, they do this with their ballet shoes on, you know, standing on literally on their toes. They're crazy, those girls. Like our friend Lisa can jump off the sofa and land on her toes, you know, land on her, you know, the way they stand in ballet. So if you start young enough, then anything's possible. So just feel this. So when you're off the heels, the energy just tends to come up. So it's a great exercise to just concentrate on staying down. And of course, you're much more bouncy, you're much more springy. You can't really control it with the mind. You just have to let it go. You just have to have fun. Yeah. Okay. So now we've killed the legs. Let's leave it there.